Okay, this is module 3 for 2024 training, Ahip training. And tonight we are ready to go into module 3. So can you all see my screen? Nope, because I'm not sharing it. Okay, I'm going to share it now. Okay, can you see my screen now? Okay, so you see, after each night when we finish, I go in while I'm right there and I do the practice test for the module. So I've completed module 1, see the check mark, and I've completed module 2. So before we go into module 3, were there any questions that anyone had about module 1 or module 2? Were there any questions that you needed answered? Were there any questions that you did not get correct in the practice test that you needed clarification or explanation? Okay, then let's dig into module 3. Module 3 is about Medicare Part D prescription drug coverage. You're going to learn how to explain the types of Part D plans, including standalone prescription drug plans. You're going to learn how to explain the prescription drug piece that's in the Medicare Advantage plan. You'll understand the Medicare Part D eligibility rules, identify the Medicare beneficiaries who may enroll in standalone prescription drug plans, obtain basic knowledge about drug formularies and the use of tiering in the benefit structures, review what drugs are covered under Part D and what drugs are not covered under Part D, learn about the Part D standard and alternative benefits, list standard benefit out-of-pocket costs, including deductibles and cost sharing for generics and brand name drugs. Explain the term true out-of-pocket costs, TROOP, true out-of-pocket cost, and what counts towards that annual true out-of-pocket cost. You'll be able to describe what happens once a Part D beneficiary reaches the catastrophic limits. You'll gain knowledge about pharmacy networks and their role in the Part D plan, be able to explain Part D premiums and the way these premiums can be paid, identify the role and the amount of Part D late enrollment penalties, that's your LEP, learn about Part D drug management tools and formulary requirements, identify enrollee rights under Part D, including the rights to request coverage of drugs not on a plan's formulary, as well as the appeals process, learn how beneficiaries may file grievances for their Part D plans, gain a basic understanding of Part D assistance programs for individuals with limited income and limited resources, be able to explain how pharmaceutical assistance programs may provide sources of help for low-income individuals, understand the importance of meaning of creditable coverage, learn about the interplay between Medicaid and Medicare regarding Part D coverage. It's a lot to learn tonight, but we're going to see if we can't get through it together. That's if my screen will move. Ah, here we go. Okay, welcome to Module 3. Where did it go? Remember, at each module, The navigation instructions are always going to be the same. You're going to have the previous button, the next button. You can't go to the next button until you've done everything on that one page. At the top of the left-hand side is always where you can download the slides for the particular module. So if you've been going along, you've already downloaded module 1, module 2 as a PDF, and now you can download module 3. Okay, somebody asked a question. Let me see, can I answer? Question is about Zoom session recordings. Are they somewhere I can listen? Maureen, the replays of each of these trainings will be on my YouTube channel. So module 1 is already there. I have to put module 2 up. It's ready to be uploaded. So each of them will be on the YouTube channel. I hope that answers that for you. Okay, terms and conditions, the same as module 1, module 2. You know that everything in here is copyrighted by the United States. You cannot use this material as if it was your own. You're only here to learn from the information. Learning objectives for module 3, what Part D plans are and who is eligible to enroll. Part D, standard and alternate benefits. Part D, management tools, covered drugs, formulary requirements. Part D, true out-of-pocket cost and help for beneficiaries with limited income, late enrollment penalties. So here's an overview of the changes for 2023 and 2024. As part of the Inflation Reduction Act, Congress made several changes to the Part D program that will be further addressed in this training. Those changes include capping beneficiary cost sharing for covered insulin at $35 beginning in 2023. So you will see on the plans that are in effect for this year, insulin is capped at $35. Now, if you have someone who is on insulin and they get their prescription and it's more than $35 per order per month, then that means that that insulin is not covered on the formulary, so they're paying the cost of the drug. So because it's $35 doesn't mean that every insulin out there is covered on every plan. The Inflation Reduction Act also eliminates cost sharing for certain Part D covered adult vaccinations in 2023. So for 2023, vaccinations are covered, such as shingle shots, which were previously not covered. COVID vaccinations are covered. Any covered adult vaccination. Also, eliminating the 5% coinsurance requirement in the catastrophic coverage phase beginning in 2024. So right now, in the catastrophic phase, it's a fixed copay amount for generics or 5%, whichever is greater, and it's a fixed copay amount for brands or 5%, whichever is greater. So what this is saying is that for 2024, the 5% coinsurance requirement is being eliminated. Expanding eligibility for low-income subsidies for beneficiaries with incomes up to 100%, 150% of the federal poverty level beginning in 2023. The legislation also imposed certain requirements on drug manufacturers that may reduce the cost of Part D drugs. So remember those because there are changes. So you'll probably see those on your tests. Make sure that you made notes about those. Medicare Part D covers certain prescription drugs, diabetic supplies, and vaccines. Coverage of Medicare Part D benefits is provided only through private companies. There is no fee-for-service Part D benefit. Standalone prescription drug plans, or PDPs, Medicare Advantage plans with prescription drugs is called MAPDs. Cost PD prescription drug plans are Medicare cost plans that cover Part D prescriptions as an optional supplemental benefit. Medicare and Medicaid plans, the dual plans will always have a prescription drug plan included, a prescription drug piece included in those plans, and the prescription drug is always included in the PACE plans. To become eligible for a Medicare Part D plan, an individual must be entitled to Part A and or enrolled under Part B. So unlike eligibility for a Medicare Advantage plan, eligibility for a prescription drug plan, they could have only Part A or only Part B. A United States citizen or lawfully present in the United States on or before the enrollment effective date, they're eligible if they have Part A and or Part B. Individuals meeting the above criteria are generally eligible to obtain Part D benefits through any PDP that's offered in their service area in which they permanently reside, depending on how they receive their Medicare benefits. In the chat, tell me which Medicare Advantage plan can you also write a prescription drug plan? I'll continue, but I want you to put that answer in the chat, please. To obtain Part D benefits from other types of Medicare health plans, such as an MAPD, Medicare, Medicaid plan, or PACE plan, the individual will have to meet the additional eligibility criteria for those plans. For an example, to enroll in a Medicare Advantage with prescription drug, individuals must both be entitled to Part A and Part B, not A or B. Did anybody put anything in chat? PFFS, correct. MSAs, correct. Okay, I just want to check to make sure everybody was listening. Okay, Medicare Part D prescription drug eligibility. Individuals' eligibility to enroll in a standalone depends on how they receive their medical benefits. Generally, only beneficiaries enrolled in original Medicare, an MA/MSA, a PFFS plan, or a cost plan may enroll in a standalone prescription drug plan. So in the chat, my very smart students said PFFS, which is correct, and MSA, which is correct. But someone who has only original Medicare, can also enroll in a standalone prescription drug plan, and someone who has a cost plan can also enroll in a standalone prescription drug plan. So remember those things, the 4 things: original Medicare, an MA, MSA, a private fee-for-service, or a cost plan. Those are the people who can enroll in a standalone prescription drug plan. Beneficiaries enrolled in an MA, MSA may only obtain Part D benefits through a standalone prescription drug plan. Beneficiaries enrolled in a cost plan or an MA private fee-for-service plan may obtain benefits through their plan if it's offered, or through a standalone prescription drug plan. Beneficiaries enrolled in a MA, HMO, or PPO may only obtain Part D benefits through that HMO or PPO plan. They cannot have a standalone prescription drug plan. In some cases, employer group plan enrollees may have additional choices. Individuals enrolled in a Medicare Medicaid plan or a PACE plan may only receive the Part D benefits through their plans, because those 2 types will include prescription drug plans sections always. Here's some examples of Medicare Part D eligibility. Mr. Singh just became eligible for Medicare. However, Ms. Singh just became eligible for Medicare. However, she's not eligible for premium-free Part A. She has chosen not to pay the premium to obtain Part A, but will enroll in Part B. She asked her broker whether she can get coverage for her prescription drugs as well. Her broker correctly advises her that she's eligible to enroll in Part D and may choose among the freestanding prescription drug plans available in the area where she lives. I'm going to go back to look at the second example. Okay, the second example was Mr. Page has original Medicare and gets his Part D coverage through a standalone prescription drug plan. During the annual election period, he wishes to enroll in an MA HMO. If Mr. Page chooses the Medicare Advantage HMO, he may no longer get his Part D benefits through a standalone prescription drug plan and must choose a plan through the HMO that includes Part D benefits, an MAPD plan, if he wishes to maintain prescription drug coverage. Are there any questions so far? Covered drugs. Part D plans cover prescription drugs. Biologics are drugs made of natural sources. I may not be pronouncing that right. Does anyone have a different pronunciation? Biologics.
Yeah,
that's
biologics.
What it is.
Mm-hmm.
Biologics are drugs made of natural sources, human, animal, or microorganism, that are not chemically synesthetized. Examples include allergy shots and gene therapies. Prescription drugs, Part D plans also cover insulin. Part D plans cover medical supplies associated with the injection of insulin, the syringes, the needles, the alcohol swabs, and gauze, or delivering insulin into the body, such as an inhalation chamber. Vaccines not covered by Part B are covered under Part D. There are some drugs that are specifically excluded from Part D coverage. And when your customer wants any of these, it's no argument. They're not covered. Medicare doesn't cover it. The plan's not going to cover it. Medicare doesn't say the plan has to cover it. The plan is not going to cover it. Those drugs include drugs for weight loss or gain, fertility, cosmetic purposes, symptomatic relief of cough and colds, vitamins, prescription vitamins, and minerals, with the exception of prenatal vitamins and fluoride preparations for certain uncommon vitamin D analogs. Vitamin D2 and D3 are excluded from Part D coverage. Medical foods formulated to be consumed or administered internally under the supervision of a physician that are not regulated as drugs under Section 505 of the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. Erectile dysfunction drugs when used for sexual dysfunction. Non-prescription drugs, some off-label use drugs, drugs covered under Part A and B, even if an individual does not have such coverage. Now, in certain plans, you will find some of these things are covered, but they're going to be limited to whatever that plan has on their formulary. There are some plans that will cover erectile dysfunction drugs, and there are some plans that will cover vitamin prescriptions. So you have to be very, very careful. Look in the evidence of coverage. If you're not sure, call the carrier, but don't make the assumption that every one of those drugs are not covered. Part D plans are permitted to offer supplemental benefits that cover drugs that otherwise meet the definition of a Part D prescription drug, but are explicitly excluded from coverage, such as certain prescribed weight loss drugs. Formularies. Part D plans generally do not cover all drugs available in every category of Part D covered drugs, because in some cases, several similar drugs are available to treat the same medical condition. I am told that there are thousands of blood pressure treating medications, but you will find that the medical practices generally use certain ones for certain type of high blood pressure issues. And those are probably the ones that the provider has found to be most effective. Part D plans include the Part D drugs they will cover on a list known as the formulary. Formularies are developed by pharmacists, doctors, and other experts. Every year that I've taken Ahip, this question has been on there. Formularies are developed by pharmacists, doctors, and other experts. Write that down. Part D plan formularies must include at least 2 drugs in each therapeutic category, generic and brand name drugs. Tiering. What is tiering? That's how the common feature of the Part D benefit structures and formulary is cost-sharing tiers. Tiered cost-sharing means grouping Part D drugs into differing cost-sharing levels within the plan sponsor's formulary. Many plans group drugs into 3 or 4 tiers, with lower tiers requiring less beneficiary cost sharing than higher tiers. For example, Tier 1 generics, Tier 2 preferred brand names, Tier 3 non-preferred brand names, and Tier 4 high-cost drugs or specialty drugs. We often see a 5-tier structure where it is preferred generics, then generics, then brands, preferred brands, and then specialty drugs. Some carriers, however, have 6 tiers, and that 6th tier is one that is definitely the composition drugs, where the pharmacist actually puts them together like they do in the tier 4 here, or the tier 5, the specialty drugs. In evaluating whether a Part D plan should be recommended to a beneficiary, it is important to confirm not only that the beneficiary's drugs are on the formulary, but also evaluate which cost-sharing tier the drugs fall into. Part D plan benefits. All Part D plans must cover at least the Part D standard benefit or meet the requirements for alternative benefits. Benefit structures that are not standard but instead are actuarially equivalent are known as alternative coverage. The standard benefit structure includes several coverage phases, including a deductible, an initial coverage phase between the deductible and the initial coverage limit, a coverage gap phase between the initial coverage limit and the out-of-pocket threshold. This phase is also known as the donut hole. The catastrophic coverage phase that applies after the beneficiary reaches the annual out-of-pocket threshold. Alternative coverage is prescription drug coverage that is not standard coverage, but is at least actuarially equivalent to standard drug coverage. Actuarial equivalent means that the value of the Part D benefits must be at least the same as the standard coverage. Alternative coverage must also not have an annual deductible that exceeds the annual deductible under the standard benefit and impose cost sharing no greater than the standard benefit once the annual out-of-pocket threshold is met. Alternative benefits may also be structured with some or all of the coverage phases that are part of the standard benefits. Some Part D plans may offer enhanced coverage for an additional monthly premium known as enhanced alternative benefits. Coverage enhancements may include, for example, a reduction of the deductible, coverage of excluded drugs, and or a decrease in the beneficiary coinsurance amounts. Standard Part D benefits for 2024. For 2024, the standard benefit requires the beneficiary to pay. Now remember, this is the Medicare model. This is the standard. So each of the carriers' prescription drug benefits are going to be equal to this or better than this. It cannot be greater in terms of out-of-pocket costs for the Medicare beneficiary. 25% of prescription drug costs during the initial coverage phase, that is between the deductible and the initial coverage limit of $5,030, or the actuarial equivalent to an average expected coinsurance of no more than 25% of actual costs during the initial coverage phase. Most of your plans that are in the Medicare Advantage plans may or may not have a deductible, and then that initial coverage days is generally a coinsurance or a copay, depending on the tier, until the individual reaches the $5,030. The $545 is the deductible for 2024. So if there is a deductible in any of the prescription drug plans, it cannot exceed $545. And that's an annual deductible. 25% of the cost of generic drugs and 25% of the undiscounted cost of brand name drugs is what the beneficiary will pay using the standard model through when they're going through the coverage gap. Let me say that again because my tongue's got all mixed up there. 25% of the cost of generic drugs and 25% of the undiscounted cost of brand name drugs during the coverage gap is what the individual is expected to pay. Note that from a beneficiary perspective, there is no longer a gap. However, spending after the initial coverage limit during the so-called coverage gap phase remains relevant because during this period of drug spending, drug manufacturers are responsible for 70% of the cost of the drug, known as the manufacturer discount. This 70% is attributed to beneficiary out-of-pocket costs and counts towards the spending necessary to reach the catastrophic coverage phase, even though the beneficiary isn't paying it. So it helps the beneficiary if they're in the so-called coverage gap to go through the coverage gap to the catastrophic phase, which is the next phase, faster, and it's not all of their money that's counted that gets them to the catastrophic phase. What is the catastrophic phase? What's the catastrophic coverage? Yes, Cordia.
Sorry, I was muted. So that's good news. So Claire, if I'm wrong, correct me. So what the manufacturer pays, they're 70% during the coverage gap, plus what the customer is paying out of pocket. All that combined is added together to get them to the catastrophic phase?
Right.
Great.
That is much better than before.
Uh-huh.
But when you look at it from the customer's point of view, and the customer is paying 25% of the cost, and they were paying, let's say they were paying $35 for a 90-day supply before, and now they got to pay 25% of the cost. It doesn't, to them, in their perception, it's still a lot of money.
It is. For example, I'm in the coverage gap right now. Ozempic has put me in the coverage gap. So I went from paying $42 to $275.
Yeah.
And now I feel better because you're telling me that 70% is going to be added to what I'm paying. So that's going to get me out of this gap sooner than I thought.
It will, but then also you may not be on Ozempic that long.
Oh. That's a thought.
Some of the pharmacy reports are saying that it's not like an insulin the way you're going to be on it forever. So, that may change.
Oh, good. Thank you very much for all of that. Thank you.
Once beneficiary out-of-pocket costs, including the 70% drug manufacturer discounts, each total $8,000. That's the number that gets them into the catastrophic coverage for 2024, 8,000. I'm glad it's a round even number. That's one I can remember, 8,000. Then the beneficiary goes through the coverage gap and reaches the catastrophic coverage. The out-of-pocket costs that count towards reaching the catastrophic limit are known as the true out-of-pocket costs. Every year that I've had this Ahip test, that question's been on there too. What is included in the true out-of-pocket cost? So take notes here. Make sure that you know what is the true. What is the true out-of-pocket cost? In some instances, amounts not directly paid by the beneficiary, including the manufacturer discounts, count towards the troop. After reaching the annual out-of-pocket threshold, the beneficiary pays nothing. Okay, standard plan. This is what it looks like in chart form. So catastrophic coverage, we'll start at the bottom because phase one starts at the bottom. If there's a deductible, the enrollee pays 100% of whatever the deductible is. Then they go into the initial coverage. The standard model deductible is $545. You may have plans that have deductibles that apply to tier 3, 4, and 5, and 6, and does not apply to tiers 1 and 2. So be careful when you're looking at the deductible. Make sure you know which tiers the deductible applies to in the plan that you're offering. After the deductible, then there's the initial coverage. For those plans that will have no deductible, the individual is immediately into the initial coverage. And this is where the enrollee pays 25% of prescription drug costs. $5,030 is the total drug cost for that initial stage. And again, the standard model is a co-insurance of 25%. Most plans will have co-pays for all of the tiers except 5 and 6. They will have co-insurance. After the initial coverage phase, then you're in the coverage gap. And that's where the enrollee pays 25%. The manufacturer pays their portion. Together, when it equals $8,000, then they're in the catastrophic coverage, and the enrollee pays $0. I think that's great. That's really good. I know some people who paid and they're still paying because there was that 5% or greater thing. So remember early on it said that was changing. So that's the change. There's no 5% or this amount, and it's, or whichever is greater. If they hit $8,000, that's it. That's wonderful. Okay, applicable measures to determine coverage phases. It is important to note that there are different financial measures to determine when a new coverage phase is met. Progression through the deductible and initial coverage phase is determined by, is based on total gross covered prescription drug costs, which refers to spending on covered Part D drugs by beneficiaries or on their behalf by any third party, as well as the Part D sponsor. Progression through the coverage gap is determined by accumulated true out-of-pocket costs spending as explained in subsequent slides. So let's take a look at that. Special cost sharing for insulins and vaccines. There is no cost sharing for Part D adult vaccines recommended by the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, even in the deductible phase. This includes, but is not limited to, shingles, Tdap, which is tetanus, diphtheria. I don't know if anybody's, do they still give whooping cough shots? Hepatitis A. The cost sharing for a 1-month supply of a covered insulin product cannot be more than $35 in any coverage phase. So if someone tells you they got their insulin and they paid $247, it is not one that's on the formulary. Yes, Cordia?
Always with the questions, at least I'm awake. What, do we know of some insulins that actually cost more than $35? Because
Oh, yeah, most of them do.
oh, because there's some that are excluded, huh? Some insulins that are excluded.
Mhm.
So we
And
just
then
need to
there are
Google
some
that.
plans that have insulins that are zero. They don't cost anything.
Okay, so we need to go
And
to the evidence of
remember now,
coverage.
there are different kinds of insulins. There's the human-made insulins, and then there are the, I'm not the
Animal
medical person, but I see my nurse down there shaking her head.
help.
Thank you, Lauren.
Miss Faye,
Yes.
the whooping cough was had to have that shot before I had the babies, and everybody in my family had to have them.
Really? So they still give them?
Yeah, my mom, my mother-in-law, everybody had to have it.
Oh, okay. All right. Good to know. Okay, examples of beneficiary costs. Let's look at some cost examples. Mr. James is enrolled in a PDP with no monthly premium and a standard benefit structure. He takes multiple maintenance prescription drugs that are on the plan formulary with a total cost of $6,400 annually. On an annual basis, Mr. James will pay $2,008.75 for his drugs. And this is how that will come about. Of the $6,400 of drug costs, he's going to pay the $545 deductible, which is the standard. And then the difference between that and what's left over, $58.55, he's going to pay 25% of that. And that's how that added together with the deductible, he will pay $2,008.75. Now, let's go back and look at the second example. Example 2. Mr. Bingham is enrolled in a prescription drug plan with a $500 deductible and no premium. His only anticipated need is his monthly supply of insulin and diabetic supplies. During the deductible phase, Mr. Bingham will pay no more than $35 a month for his insulin and the full cost of his diabetic supplies until his out-of-pocket reaches $500. After the deductible is met, Mr. Bingham will pay his applicable copayment for insulin, which can be no more than $35, and his applicable copay for his diabetic supplies. Now, most of the plans will offer the diabetic supplies at no out-of-pocket cost for the individual. Make sure that you look to see, and sometimes it will depend on where the individual, the Medicare beneficiary, actually receives the supplies. If they order them from the preferred location that's given in the plan, and they use the preferred brands that's in the plan, they may have a zero copay for diabetic supplies. However, for the same supply of with a different brand name that is not the preferred one of the plan, they may have a copay. And there's always, it seems to me, going to be a copay when someone is getting their diabetic supplies directly from the local pharmacy on the corner, rather than get them through the sources that the plan suggests. So if someone says they're paying a lot of money for their supplies, find out where they're getting them, and if, depending on which carrier it is, if they're using the preferred distribution channel for those supplies. true out-of-pocket cost, troop. What counts? For the troop is calculated on an annual basis. Generally, troop includes beneficiary payments for Part D prescription drugs, including the deductible, cost sharing above the deductible, and up to the initial coverage limit, and above the initial coverage limit to the annual out-of-pocket threshold. After the initial coverage period, a drug manufacturer's discount for brand name drugs counts towards the true out-of-pocket costs. Generally, for drug costs to count towards troop, drugs must be on the plan's formulary and be purchased at the Part D plan's participating network pharmacy. Amounts paid or borne by the AIDS Drug Assistance Program and the Indian Health Service also count towards troop. Amounts paid by or through qualified state pharmaceutical assistance programs, most charities, health savings account, flexible spending accounts, and medical savings account also count towards troop. Okay, let's look at what doesn't count. I was just about to say what doesn't count, but they have it here, and we can just go. Well, I thought they had it here. Let's see. What is excluded? These are the costs that are not included in the true out-of-pocket maximum. Troop costs, these costs do not count towards your troop cost. Costs for drugs not on the Part D's formulary unless the beneficiary requests and receives a formulary exception under which the plan covers the drug. Costs for over-the-counter and other non-Part D drugs. Costs for covered Part D drugs obtained out of network unless the plan's out-of-network coverage policy applies. Costs paid for or reimbursed to an enrollee by an insurance or group health plan, most government-funded health programs, or another third party, including Medicaid, state children's health insurance, federally qualified health centers, rural health clinics, patients assistance programs outside the Part D benefit, TRICARE, Federal Employees Health Benefits Program, Black Lung funds, and health reimbursement arrangements, or costs for drugs purchased outside the United States. So getting their drugs from Canada doesn't count towards the troop. Let's look at some troop examples. Mr. Reynolds takes blood pressure medication. He requested a formulary exception, which was denied by his plan. He decided to continue taking the non-formulary prescription and pay for it out of pocket. The amounts Mr. Reynolds pays for the drug do not count towards his deductible or other out-of-pocket costs. Ms. Howard has terrible seasonal allergies. To address her allergies, she takes a prescription drug that is on the formulary and supplements it with an over-the-counter drug to address specific symptoms such as runny nose. Only the amount that Ms. Howard pays for her prescription allergy medication counts towards her true out-of-pocket costs. Her costs for over-the-counter drugs do not count towards troop. Cordy, you have your hand up again, or you didn't take it down? Cordia?
Sorry about
No?
that. I took it down. Sorry.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if you had a new question. Part D pharmacy network. Part D coverage is generally provided through contracted pharmacies, network pharmacies. So each of the carriers has their own network pharmacies. These are the pharmacies to which they have made contracts for lower pricing. So overall, it benefits everyone. the plan benefits because they're getting drugs through that particular pharmacy chain at lower pricing. The member or beneficiary is getting lower pricing, so there's less out of pocket overall cost for them, particularly when they're paying a percentage. Part D coverage is generally provided through the contract pharmacies in the Part D's plans service area, except that private fee-for-service plans are not required to use a pharmacy network, but may voluntarily choose to have one. Network pharmacies include retail pharmacies, long-term care pharmacies, and may also include mail order pharmacies. Within their networks, Part D plans may designate some pharmacies as preferred that offer lower levels of cost sharing than apply at other network pharmacies. Enrollees are generally required to fill prescriptions for covered drugs at network pharmacies. Under certain circumstances, enrollees may fill prescriptions for covered drugs at out-of-network pharmacies, but possibly at a higher cost to the enrollee. For example, if the enrollee has an illness or loses a drug while traveling outside the service area, or if circumstances result in limited drug access through an in-network pharmacy. So sometimes if you're traveling, you forgot your medications, you can still use an out-of-network pharmacy at the in-network pharmacy price. Sometimes, not always, not a definite. Part D premiums. Part D plans may charge a premium. Typically, a higher premium means lower out-of-pocket costs for the plan. Part D enrollees have three options for paying their Part D premium: an automatic electronic mechanism, such as withdrawal from their checking or savings account, or automatic charge against their credit card or debit card, direct monthly billing from the plan, automatic deduction from their monthly Social Security check. Typically, it takes 2 to 3 months for Social Security withholding to begin or end. When withholding begins, it will be for the 2-3 months of premium that are owed. Generally, the beneficiary must stay with the premium payment option they choose for the entire year. You want to encourage your prospects and members who will have a premium to use some form of automatic deduction. And bank account, checking, or savings is the number one most efficient way. Second would be a debit or credit card. If an enrollee does not choose an option, the beneficiary will be billed by the Part D plan. And that's where they can run into problems because they don't open the mail, or they didn't understand the bill, and somebody at the house didn't know that was the bill for their prescription drug coverage, and they didn't pay it and they lost it. So try to make sure that your customers have some automated payment in process. Beneficiaries may have to pay a monthly premium penalty to join a Part D plan if they do not have credible drug coverage and do not enroll when first eligible for Part D. They will have at least 63 continuous days following a beneficiary's initial enrollment period for Part D, during which the beneficiary did not have either Part D or other credible drug coverage. The penalty will be 1% of the national average beneficiary premium for each month the beneficiary did not have a Part D or credible coverage. In general, The penalty is in effect for as long as the beneficiary has a Medicare prescription drug plan. Beneficiaries who qualify for low-income subsidy are not subject to the late enrollment penalty. Late enrollment penalty examples. Mr. Russell first became eligible on December 1, 2021. He didn't sign up and has not had credible drug coverage. He now wishes to obtain drug coverage during the annual enrollment to begin effective on January 1, 2023. He's not low-income subsidy eligible. Mr. Russell will have to pay a penalty of 13% of the national average beneficiary premium, 1% for every month he did not have credible drug coverage after becoming eligible for every month that he stays covered under the Part D plan. Does everybody understand how that is calculated? Any questions?
Will that be continuous year after year, or he can re-sign for new Medicare the
For
year after?
for as long as he has a prescription drug plan, doesn't matter what carrier he goes to, it's going to follow him everywhere he goes as long as he has a prescription drug plan.
Wow.
So for the rest of his life.
Wow. Okay.
Mrs. Smith lost the credible drug coverage that her employer provided when she retired. Ms. Smith signed up for Part D with an effective date of 60 days after the date she lost her coverage. Mrs. Smith will not be subject to a late enrollment penalty. Why? Because she had 63 days and she did it within 60. So she's good. I have people who are customers who have Medicare Advantage plan that has a prescription drug benefit in it. And before that, they had only original Medicare, no prescription drug plan for the period that they were without the Part D plan and just you was using Medicare because they had no prescriptions, and then they decided they now have diagnoses and they need to get full medical care. So they go to a Medicare Advantage plan, but it wouldn't matter even if they purchased a standalone prescription drug plan. But if they purchased a standalone prescription drug plan, they got the premium plus the penalty. With the Medicare Advantage plan, they got zero premium, but they have the penalty. So they're paying every month. Part D, management tools and formulary requirements. In addition to formularies and cost-sharing tiers, Part D plans use a variety of prescription drug management tools, including step therapy. One or more similar lower-cost drugs must be tried before other costlier drugs are covered. You will see this happen a lot when someone goes in and they've seen the ad on TV and they request what the drug is on TV, and the doctor wants to prescribe it and it's denied until they try something that is of a lower cost. Prior authorization requires the doctor to contact the plan and request authorization before the plan will cover the prescription drug. The doctor must show the plan that the drug is medically necessary. So the patient does not get to choose the drug that they want to use. The doctor does the prescribing, and the doctor has to request a prior authorization if it's necessary, because they're the ones who need to show the medical necessity for the individual to have the particular drug in question. Quantity limits is another tool that's used for management. So quantity limits for safety and cost purposes, Part D sponsors may limit the amount of prescription drugs they cover over a certain period of time. So for certain drugs, particularly pain medications, those prescriptions have limits. So people can only be prescribed a certain amount, and the doctors are well aware of what these limits are. Comprehensive Addiction and Recovery Act programs, plans may impose certain limitations on the prescribers or the pharmacies a beneficiary can use to manage utilization for beneficiaries who are at risk of misusing or abusing frequently abused drugs such as opioids. Transition requirements. Part D sponsors must provide coverage of at least 1 month of a non-formulary drug to the following individuals prescribed a non-formulary drug, including Part D drugs that are on a sponsor's formulary but require prior authorization. So when you're writing plans during AEP and they're effective for January 1, but it's a drug that's not on the new carrier's formulary, the new carrier must cover that drug for that first 30-day fill until the patient has seen the doctor, gotten new prescriptions, a different prescription, or authorization for that medication. Beneficiaries initially enrolling in Part D, these limits are safety-based. For beneficiaries initially enrolling in Part D, beneficiaries switching plans, current enrollees affected by formulary changes, current enrollees experience a level of care change if the Part D sponsor is notified of the change before or at the time of the request of the fill. Continued transition requirements. Beneficiaries eligible for transition fills must receive coverage for at least 1 month during the first 90 days after their enrollment or plan switch or formulary change. To the extent that a current enrollee in a long-term care setting is outside their 90-day transition period, the sponsor must still provide a 1-month supply of non-formulary Part D drugs while an exception or a prior authorization request is being processed. During the transition period, the Part D plan does not apply prior authorization, non-safety-based quantity limits, or step therapy rules. The enrollee and their physician can request an exception to the Part D plan's formulary to continue coverage of the non-formulary drug or transition to a formulary drug. The rights of the enrollee, and this enrollee in the prescription drug plan is going to have rights that are very, very similar to the ones in the Medicare Advantage plans. Enrollee rights requesting coverage determinations and appeals. Part D plan sponsors must provide access via a secure website for enrollees to quickly request a determination on whether the plan will cover a drug or appeal a coverage decision. Enrollees may appeal coverage determinations, decisions on exceptions, or requests concerning tiering or formularies. Plan sponsors must also require network pharmacies to provide enrollees with a printed notice with the plan's toll-free number and website for requesting coverage determination. Help for individuals with limited income and limited resource. If a beneficiary has limited income and resources, they may qualify for LIS, low income subsidy, to cover all or part of their Part D plan premium and cost sharing. To qualify for LIS in 2023, beneficiary income may not exceed 150% of the federal poverty level. The 150% FPL varies geographically as follows. For 48 states, it's $21,870 for an individual, $29,580 for a couple. Alaska and Hawaii Alaska is the highest. Hawaii is a little bit higher than the other 48 states, and then Alaska is higher than Hawaii. For 2023, beneficiary resources may not exceed $15,160 individual, $30,240 couple. These limits are increased by $1,500 per person if the beneficiary notified the Social Security Administration that they expect to use some of their resources for burial expenses. Resource and income limits to qualify in 2024 will be released early or later in the fall of 2023. So we won't know what the FPL for 2024 is until later. For 2024, individuals who qualify for full LIS or full benefit dual eligibles with income at or below 100% of the federal poverty level and resources below the applicable threshold have a zero deductible and cost sharing. Maximum cost sharing up to the out-of-pocket threshold of $1.55 for generic drugs and $4.60 for other drugs. For 2024, individuals who qualify for full LIS and are FBDEs with income over 100% of the federal poverty level and resources below the applicable threshold have a zero deductible and cost sharing of a maximum $4.50 for generics, $11.20 for other drugs. For 2024, individuals who qualify for low-income subsidy but are not FBDEs have a zero deductible and cost sharing of $4.50 for generics, $11.20 for other drugs. That's the max for them. Other help for low income. Some pharmaceutical manufacturers operate programs that assist low-income individuals in obtaining drugs at reduced or no cost. Some states have assistance programs designed specifically for their residents. Some programs are qualified state pharmaceutical assistance programs or SAPs that count towards the troop, and some do not count towards the troop. Becoming familiar with your state's programs may allow you to keep a beneficiary address. Costs may allow you to help a beneficiary address cost sharing for prescriptions. Encourage individuals to apply for state Medicaid aid. Beneficiaries with limited income and resources should be encouraged to apply for the low-income subsidy, also called extra help, through the state Medicaid office or the Social Security Administration. Beneficiaries may apply at any time. If beneficiaries apply to the state Medicaid office for Part D help, the state Medicaid office also will check for eligibility for other low-income assistance programs. Beneficiaries may apply for help, of course, by calling 1-800-772-1213 which is the Social Security Office, are going to ssa.gov. Certain individuals automatically qualify for extra help. They have full Medicaid coverage. They get help from their state Medicaid program, paying their Part B premiums in a Medicare savings program, or they get supplemental security income, SSI. These people automatically qualify for extra help with their prescriptions. Medicare mails these individuals a purple letter to let them know they automatically qualify. They should keep this letter for their records. They do not need to apply for extra help if they get this letter. So that's something you can ask now. Did you get a purple letter? Employer and union coverage of drugs. Employer or union coverage, employers, unions will notify their employees of whether their non-Medicare prescription drug coverage is credible. Coverage that on average covers at least as much as the Medicare standard Part D covers via an annual statement. So every employer and every union plan where people are covered for prescription drugs must issue a letter that the plan that they have is credible or is not. Because if it's not, the individual needs to apply for a standalone prescription drug plan, or they will be penalized because they have no credible coverage. If coverage is credible and the beneficiary keeps it, the beneficiary will not incur a premium penalty if later they lose or drop the employer coverage and joins a Part D plan. If coverage is not credible, the beneficiary will need to enroll in a Medicare Part D during their initial eligibility program to avoid the late enrollment penalty. If a beneficiary has credible drug coverage through TRICARE, VA, or FEHBP, Federal Employers Plan, they can compare that coverage with available Part D plans to decide whether to enroll in Part D. The beneficiary should check with the employer or union benefits administrator before making changes to their employer union coverage. If a beneficiary drops the employer union coverage, they may not be able to get it back and may also lose other health coverage. There will be no late enrollment penalty if the beneficiary retires or otherwise loses employer union credible coverage and joins a Medicare Part D plan, or otherwise obtains credible drug coverage within 63 days. When a Medicaid beneficiary becomes eligible for Medicare, then Medicare instead of Medicaid covers the Part D drugs once the beneficiary is enrolled in a Part D plan. So if the Medicaid beneficiary doesn't choose a plan, Medicare will select one for them. For more information, there's Medicare.gov, CMS.gov, the Medicare and You Handbook, and the Medicare.gov media/10416. What are your questions?
I have a question. I'm still a little confused with the extra help. Do they have to have Medicaid?
No,
Okay.
extra help can be low income subsidy, and they
Okay,
don't have to have Medicaid. However, to get the low income subsidy, and low income subsidy has various levels.
Mm-hmm.
So based on their income and assets,
And they can apply at any time.
anytime. Yes.
I have a question. One of the slides talked about, let's just give an example, Sarah, she didn't have to pay the premium. She thought she would get the free premium for coverage A. She opted out of it and got with coverage B. And then she still got a prescription drug plan. I thought you had to have A and B to get a prescription drug plan.
No, remember the slide for the eligibility for the standalone prescription drug plan says you must be entitled to A
Entitled.
and or have B.
Okay.
So you could have A without B and you can get a prescription drug plan, or you could have B without A and you can get a prescription drug plan.
Got it.
Any other questions?
I had a quick question. With the LIS, if someone qualifies for LIS, that eliminates that late enrollment penalty for Part D?
No, that's the Medicare Savings Program that's going to take care of the Part B and
No,
eliminate the
not
penalty.
D. D is in dog.
Oh, D, yes, D. I'm
Okay.
sorry, I thought you said B for boy.
So, but that's the other half of my question. So the Medicare Savings Program eliminates the Part B as in boy late enrollment penalty. Does getting Medicare Savings take away the Part D, or that's just two separate? LIS is for getting rid of the drug late enrollment, and then Medicare Savings gets rid of the Part B late enrollment. Is that the way it works?
If they approve for Medicare Savings, that will take care of any penalty they have for Part B, any premium they have for Part B, that all of that is Medicare Savings.
Okay.
Someone may not qualify for Medicare Savings, but can qualify for low income subsidy, LIS, and that will take away any penalty, LEP, late enrollment penalty for Part D, and eliminate their premiums for the Part D prescription drug plan, if there is one, lower their copays, and it will depend on the level of LIS that they're approved for.
Thank you.
You are welcome. Any other questions? Okay, so everybody who's moving along with me and doing your exams, that's great. We will go on and do our exam for Module 3 tonight. And I will see you tomorrow. The week has gone by pretty quickly. We'll do Module 4 tomorrow.